Welcome back to the Reflactor channel. Today we have a very special telescope here in the workshop that needs a little bit of fixing. This is a very large Dobsonian telescope that has a 14.5-inch mirror that's going to gather a whole lot of light and produce some amazing images. Let's take a quick tour of what we've got. Like any good Dobsonian, this is spinning on some nice Teflon bearings. In fact, let's take a look down here. I'll show you. There you go. There's some nice Teflon blocks there. The trunnions themselves they're aluminum, it looks like, and that's a really nice smooth finish. There are Teflon bearings right there as well. Now let's take a look in the mirror box. So there's a 14.5-inch mirror right there. You can see it's a plain wooden box. Now what's interesting is the corners here. Those little clips there are holding the mirror from falling out of the tube. Basically, that's the only job, is to keep the mirror from falling forward. In each corner, and it's hard to see, there are actually nylon bolts that they've used to center this in the box. Now, one thing that I can't figure out is over on the left side, there are several strips of linoleum tile that are stapled to the wall. They don't touch the mirror. They're not even really close to the mirror, so I can't figure that one out. If you have an idea what those are for, please leave a comment down below. Now, let's put this nice little cover on. That way I don't drop anything on the mirror. The truss rods are conveniently numbered 1 through 8, going clockwise. That sure makes it easy to put these together. Now these truss rods are really nice. They have been squeezed. It looks like they used a jig to make those. But one thing I'll probably be changing right away is that they use these hex head nuts. I'll be removing these hex head nuts and replacing them with a wing nut. That just makes it a whole lot easier. One thing I am going to do, and I'll show you while we're down here on the main case, is that, Dobsonians can be a little bit unwieldy to move. I will be putting, with the owner's approval, this handle on the side to help make it easier to move around. Now, let's follow the truss rods up to the top. We have this somewhat older style Crayford focuser, but it works just fine. It's set up for 2-inch eyepieces, and I have an adapter for smaller ones, so this will work just fine. There is a Telrad here, and I already looked at it, and the batteries have electrolyte that's leaking, so I'll have to change that out pretty quick before it does any damage to the battery box. If you have an opinion about Telrads or red dot finders, please leave a comment down below. Now let's take a look at the secondary mirror up here on the ring. And I'll bet you've never seen anything like this. This is pretty interesting. They sometimes call this the broomstick secondary. It's just a wooden dowel. And something I've never really seen is it actually has 4 collimation screws, and it has 2 rows of those. So there are technically 8 collimation screws to keep this thing in line. And that mirror is pretty big. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's a very large mirror. Look at that. I'd say that's 3 inches, over 3.5 inches, something like that. This is going to be a bit of a challenge. I think what I will do, you'll see some of the heads are sticking outside of the mirror line. What I'm going to do is I bought some knurled screws, and we're going to use those here. And we'll get everything set just right, and then one at a time I'll trim them so that the knurled part is down below the diameter of the secondary mirror, so at least it doesn't interfere with the sight line. And of course it has this pin here, which is kind of nice. That pin's job is to keep this whole contraption from falling forward in case the screws let go. Now, as far as the inside, this is just sheet metal that's painted black. It's pretty good. There is one section that we need to take care of where the focuser tube comes out. This is a nice oak block, and that's all pretty and all from the outside. But on the inside, this should be covered in black. And I have a piece of sheet metal that I'll cut and trim and make it fit there and paint it flat black. So other than that, there's really not much to do up on the top ring here. The big thing that we need to work on is figuring out what's going on with the collimation screws on the primary mirror. The owner reached out to a friend and a co-member of the Fort Worth Astronomical Society, John Geremini, and he diagnosed what we believe is going wrong with this telescope. This Dobsonian has been in the owner's family for many years, and the main problem right now is that it will not collimate, or at least maintain collimation very long. There's something wrong. In fact, there's even a clunking issue, a mechanical issue happening. We're going to have to dive into this. This one was made by a company called Sky Designs, headquartered over in Colleyville, Texas. We believe it was made in the 1980s or maybe mid-1990s. That time frame was pretty fascinating for Dobsonian telescopes. Prior to that, you had to pretty much do everything. You had to cut the parts out from plywood. You had to make the tubes and crush the tubes if you did that, or use a big sauna tube, one of those cardboard tubes. or you even had to grind your mirrors back then. These were truly home built prior to the 1980s. But just like any new developing technology, like personal computers and 3D printers, when you had to do everything yourself in the beginning, there becomes a sub-industry of little companies that build parts and sub-assemblies or kits that you can build at home and have a pretty nice setup when you're done. And that's where Sky Designs comes in. This company made shells, or I believe kits, that you could basically get home and you could finish them out and have a very nice large Dobsonian telescope at your disposal. And I believe this one costs around $1,000 to maybe $2,000 to finish up when you're all done. Now, it's the connection that this telescope has with John Dobson that makes this very special. The owner tells me that John Dobson was a friend of the family and spent a lot of time at their home. And on many occasions, he used this very telescope. Kind of cool, right? That's why I'm gonna use kid gloves as I work on this telescope and only fix what's either broken or really needs fixing. Let's disassemble it, and we'll start with the bottom part first. The aluminum truss rods are fastened at each end with a hex nut. The owner provided a special hex nut removal tool that is part of the toolkit that travels around with this telescope. Now, I probably should have asked for help on this top piece, but part of my channel is to show what can be done when you're on your own. And to be honest, this wasn't too bad. Now, it's kind of cool that this telescope came with a custom denim bag to carry those truss rods around in. Nice. All right, let's open this up. We're going to remove these screws around the base, and then the top of this should theoretically just lift off. So let's do that first. There is one screw that's holding this Velcro strip on. This uses a Velcro strip over here with Velcro covered bean bags used as counterweights. I might end up replacing these with just some nice galvanized wood screws. Okay, let's lift this off. Well, we've run into a problem. That lower board is not coming out. And I did some research and I found a helpful gentleman on cloudy nights named Sean, who's an expert on Sky Designs telescopes. And he said that lower platform is glued and screwed and it is never coming out. So we're gonna have to do this the hard way. We're gonna have to reach in, grab the mirror, and lift it out through this hole. Now, the challenge is that the mirror is 14.5 inches, and the hole up here at the top is 14.75 inches. Now, my fingers have some thickness, and I might have to just keep slamming them in a car door to make them thinner and thinner, or I could try to basically tilt the mirror a little bit as I lift it out. So let's put these screws back in along the bottom. We'll set this down on the floor, and I'll try to lift that mirror out. Doctor's orders. Have to remove my watch and ring just in case. I'll twist these out of the way. All right, what do we have here? So this is the float system. Do you see the three triangles? And they have these 3 points on them. They're floating, they're teeter-tottering. I guess it's time for a crash course in telescope mirror supports. Here we have a couple of mirrors from Newtonian telescopes. Now, they each have these hold-down clips. The two of them are removed over here, but this one has 3 hold-down clips. The purpose of the hold-down clip is not really to hold this tight into the mirror cell. It's basically to keep it from falling out the front of the telescope. That's generally what it is. It is somewhat loose in here. You can always move it a little bit, generally speaking. Now, what we need to talk about is the support from the back. And this one's already pretty much removed. Let's take this out. So these mirrors need to be supported from the back. Now in this case, it's just foam. It's a piece of foam that goes around the outer edge of the glass, right? Up until about 10 inches, I found that that's still pretty common, that they are supported around the edge, and they might have a cross pattern in the middle with basically some cork pads or felt pads in the bottom that support it. Now the problem is, when you get to mirrors that are 12 inches and larger especially, the mirrors are so heavy that if you only support them from the outside, they will actually bend under their weight, and it'll mess with the optical reflective surface, and it'll cause image issues. And so what you have to do is you have to come up with a way to evenly support the back of these telescopes. And the way that they've been doing this for a long, long time is that they will have 3 triangles, like the one you saw in that box. And those 3 triangles will touch the mirror in 3 spots. They'll have 3 of those. And what those will do, they teeter-totter. So they don't put any kind of torque or anything on the back surface. They are basically there to apply 9 very lightly loaded points on the back of the telescope, all throughout the back, mostly through the back of the surface, that will prevent any distortion in the mirror. Now, of course, if you get up to larger and larger mirrors, you have to do more than just the 3 triangles with the 3 points each. You'll have to go up to, I don't know, 6 triangles, 9 triangles, something like that. You'll have to up the ante on that to provide a really nice distributed support under the mirrors. This 14.5-inch mirror uses the 3 triangles. In my experience, I've seen them where they touch the mirror. It's a felt pad, a soft pad. This uses hardwood dowels. Actually, it's not even dowels. It's these little button dowels. To me, it seems like it applied like a really sharp point to the back of the mirror. It's a little bit worrisome. I'm going to do some research and see if I can replace those with felt. In the meantime, I probably need to clean it. Okay, so I have an entire video dedicated to how to clean a mirror, and I've done it in almost all of my videos. So I'm going to kind of speed through this one. Again, it's room temperature water. It's some Dawn dish detergent, just a little bit. A little bit of rubbing alcohol. And I have a cup of distilled water that I'll use for rinsing later on. So. And just let it soak in there for a little bit. I'm going to remove jewelry. And here we go. And just let it soak for a little bit. Okay, and clean it. And here we go. While we're cleaning up this mirror, I thought I'd share some information that I'd found out about Sky Designs, the company. I was interested to see if they had done any advertising during their heyday, so I started looking through my collection of telescope making magazine. Now, this magazine series was put out by the prolific Richard Berry, the same author of my favorite telescope-making book, shown here. I used this to make my first Dobsonian. But I digress. Telescope Making Magazine was an amazing quarterly publication dedicated to home-built telescopes, and the magazine ran from 1978 until 1992. In fact, if you find a copy, hold on to it because most of the articles are still pertinent and fascinating. Starting in the winter 1987 issue, Sky Designs appeared in the advertising area in the back of the magazine, but they were advertising optical abrasives in bulk. But it wasn't long before they moved over to the Complete Telescopes column, where I guess they started to offer full kits. They advertised there until the fall 1990 issue. Rumor has it that you can now buy digital copies of the magazine, and if I find a link to that, I'll put it down in the description box. Here I am using the corners of a paper towel to get the last drops of moisture off the mirror. All done. So here's the inside of the box. This is actually a pretty interesting layout. We have these 3 triangles, and there are button dowels on each one. And you can see they teeter-totter, right? That's because there's a collimation screw coming up through the bottom, right? And these are held in place. They can't rotate or anything because they're stapled to this fake leather disc. It's a pretty clever solution, to be honest. They're each like that. They can teeter-totter, but they can't twist. That's a problem, of course, with this triangle system, is sometimes they will spin on other telescopes, but not this one. In fact, this one actually seems pretty good. You can tell there's something metal on the bottom of this. I don't know if it's a washer. I've heard of people embedding like a nickel in the back. We're going to have to investigate if they're free to move or if the bottom is damaged. I might have to remove this disc temporarily and take a look. Let's pull one of the collimation screws out and see what it looks like. So they're just Allen head screws. I'm going to remove this disc, and I've put little markers in so I can put it back in exactly how it was, but I need to remove these staples. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with the collimation screws. So this is the float system. It's pretty clever. This fake leather mat, when it's stapled down, prevents these from spinning in place. And of course, here are the 9 points of support that the mirror sets on top of. If you flip it over, you can see where the collimation screws were hitting this fake leather. And I removed one of the staples, and if you peel this back, you can see that the collimation screw is hitting in the middle of this steel circle. These look like plugs that came out of electrical boxes or something like that. I'm going to see if there might be a better solution, but I mean, looks pretty good. I got to be honest, it's pretty clever. But I definitely have to remove these little button head dowels, and I'm going to be putting some felt circles there. So, all right. So first we got to remove these button heads. All right, so I will probably fill these in with little slices of dowel, and then I'll put little circles of very thick felt that I have on these. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I thought about filling this actually with little slices of dowel and gluing and making it flat, but I want to make sure that in the future, if somebody wants to put these back in, they can put these back in. So I'm actually just going to cut large pieces of felt and put it over this hole. I'm going to super glue it here. But there is something interesting when you turn it over, the collimation screws hit here, here, and here. When you look at this, I don't know if you can see that, these are little steel circles. They look like they are just blanks from electrical boxes, or knockouts, I think is what they used to call them. Right? You can see where the collimation screw hit it. This one's starting to tip out, so I'm actually going to take a hammer and just hammer these flat back into the wood. So in order to do that, I got to take one staple out from each of them. Let's see how these look. So this one's inset. This one's inset, which is good. This one is flush. I guess that's okay. And this one's tilted. So I think I'll hammer this one down. Let's see if I can hammer this one down. I'm gonna take it over to the concrete and hit it. So I'll be right back. All right, so I think the hammer did the trick. On all of these, I was able to take these metal discs and by hitting around the edges, drive them down so that they're about 1/16 of an inch below the surface. That one, and that one. So I think now I'm going to add that third staple back in, and then I'll go ahead and super glue the felt pads over these holes. All right, I did that 3 times. All right, super glue those. I've peeled the sticky stuff off these, put them on. Now I'm going to put super glue on just along the edge, just to lock them in place.
Yes, I am wearing safety goggles, just in case the cheap super glue I use squirts towards my face.
All right, I'll let that sit overnight. We should be able to reinstall it. I've gone ahead and vacuumed this again. And I brought the collimation screws up to common height. All right. Now, fortunately, I put very specific marks on here ahead of time. Very careful. Line them up just like they were. I'm so glad I put those marks there ahead of time. If you're enjoying this video, please push that like button. It means the world to little channels like this. All right, so here's what I think is going on. The mirror comes in and it sets down here on these teeter-totter pads, the floats. And there's these nylon centering bolts. There's a hex head on this side where you can drive that bolt in and out. These basically try to center. There's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. They try to center the mirror in the box. And the problem is, essentially, the mirror's been sticking, and apparently there's a famous quote where this guy designed you had to kick the box to get the mirror to fall into collimation. I suspect in this case that this nylon is not very slippery. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put something between that bolt and the side of the mirror. Now, of course, it has to be pretty thin. And I'm going to be using some milk jug material, and I'm going to put a staple there and a staple there. It shouldn't affect this collimation disc at all. I just need to cut 4 of these out of milk jug material. Here they are. I'm just going to put these on here and staple down the ears on both sides, and it'll give a nice slippery membrane between the nylon centering bolts and the side of the mirror. And hopefully that allows things to float a little bit better in there. We'll see how that works. Okay, so I need both hands to staple these, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Without touching the mirror. And there we go. So I'm gonna put these on. And here it is. The inside's pretty much all finished. You can see the little milk jug spacers. I've centered the mirror in the box, and I've left enough wiggle room for basically 2 business cards to fit in between. Basically 1 on each side. And there it is. The mirror is about as clean as I can get it. I did the nice gentle Orion clean. I could probably try one more time, but I really don't want to risk it. I think this mirror as is going to generate some pretty amazing views.
I scrubbed out most of the battery electrolyte with a brush, and then I soaked it in a bath of vinegar. It cleaned it up really well, and it made it smell like a salad. Let's go ahead and make a sheet metal patch to cover this wooden area, and we'll paint it matte black to match the rest of this top portion. Let's start by making a paper template. While it's true that I could have painted the wood itself black, I wanted to try my skills at making a shaped metal patch. I forgot to mark where the focuser mount screws poke through the paper, so here I am basically double checking and triple checking their location on the paper template. Don't forget to put a center point punch for where the focuser tube has to go through the template.
That's pretty close. All right, now we have the template here. We're gonna cut it out of this flashing. I think it's aluminum flashing. First, let's put these marks. All right, now we'll cut it out. And then we'll drill some holes. I cut it out very carefully. drill these holes out and see what happens next. All right, here's the test fit. Seems to look pretty good. Now I'm going to just paint it black and then put a couple nails in there to keep it in place, and it should look like it's been in there all along. All right, so here was the paper template. There's the finished product. Look at that. I'm going to put little nails in. I've removed the mirror though, so nothing gets hurt. I do need to put one up here. See if I have a tiny little nail. Looks pretty good. Looks almost like it was built that way. All right, so here is the top ring, and here is the secondary mirror on a stock. I cleaned this as well, and we're going to go ahead and put this in here from the bottom, of course, and I'm going to basically put it right back to where the screws were. We'll get it semi-collimated as far as I can, just centered in the top ring, and then one by one I'm going to replace these screws with thumb screws that are knurled, and then once we get it all done, we'll cut those down so that the heads of the bolts are not in the line of sight. This is a pretty chunky mirror. Look at that. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to put the safety pin in. It's like a grenade. You pull this pin out and the mirror can fall in. It's very bad. It's a pretty tight fit. So again, 4 screws to collimate. A little bit bizarre, to be honest. Now, that's pretty much centered. I tell you what, one by one I'm going to replace these. Let's see. All right, let's put it all together and see if we can collimate it. All right, so I've got the laser collimator in here, and I am slowly adjusting the screws on this. And as you can see, the laser is in the middle, but it's not quite in the center there. We'll adjust the collimation screws and see if they do what they're supposed to do. All right, let's see if we can get this collimated.
One by one, I'm adjusting the collimation screws at the other end of the telescope until we get that laser pointer right in the middle of the target.
They said you used to bump the box. Hello, Moon. You're looking very sharp in the Sky Design telescope.
The Orion Nebula is also looking pretty darn sharp.
This Sky Designs telescope was a real challenge, especially that secondary mirror collimation system. I'd never seen anything like that before. Now, despite that unusual secondary mirror system, this telescope had some pretty clever items. especially how the floats were supported and kept from rotating or moving, but were still flexible enough to be used for that big mirror. But I'm over the moon happy that the clunking collimation problem is resolved, and all due to the addition of a few sheets of milk jug plastic. Now, I do have to admit something. This was a bit of a tough project. I had lots and lots of questions, and I have to thank the folks on the Facebook Dobsonian group and also the Cloudy Nights forums. One gentleman in particular, his name is Sean Simonson, has an encyclopedic knowledge of the sky design system. His help was crucial, and I owe him a lot of thanks. In fact, it was Sean who was able to contact the mirror maker, Danny Arthur, who was able to find a bunch of information based solely on the serial number that I found on the mirror. Once again, the telescope community has been tremendously helpful. So I have to admit, there's a certain bit of magic about this telescope, knowing that John Dobson himself used these very eyepieces to look through these mirrors to see some magnificent views of the Texas skies. It's been a real privilege to play at least a small part in preserving this bit of amateur astronomical history. And I'm very thankful to the owner for letting me work on this, and I hope they use it for many, many years. If you enjoyed this repair video, then you might really enjoy these 2 full restoration videos right here. But until next time, thanks for watching, and clear skies, everybody. That was close.